Hi, I'm Ryan. So I run a company that does design systems and design automation as well as design services. Our main thing, though, is the name of this talk, which is how to basically get from Figma to code. Not just get from Figma to code, but do it in a way that is reproducible and is not 3 story points and like 2 weeks of work. Thank you for doing the QR code. So about me, I have been doing largely design, product management, development for close to 2 decades now. My most recent corporate experience was actually leading a global team of designers from when we had 5 folk up until the point where we had a lot more than that. And my speaker notes don't want to show up for some reason, so I think we're just going to wing it. Yep. Give me 1 sec to see if I can get them over here. Cool. I am good. So led a global design team for the last few years, and we started at 5. We ended up around 30 plus across the globe. And attempting to build a design system repeatedly was a big hallmark of that job. I'm always the dungeon master in my D&D groups, don't ask me why. And if you like hardcore MMOs, you might find me there. And I'm currently doing buttons. So the story so far. So going back to that job, but effectively, when I joined this company, which is what inspired buttons, so I'm kind of trying to set up a problem statement here. We had different designers and disparate tools. We had people using Adobe InDesign, we had people using Figma, Sketch, Axure, literally every tool that could make a design was being used across the organization. I joined and we started to fix that. So the first thing we did was build a Sketch library. For those of you who are not familiar with design tools, Sketch is kind of the grandfather, and it's Mac only, so a lot of people never get to use it. And it is one of the original comping tools. Figma is Sketch in its best form, effectively. We built a design system. So what we called our design system was a website, and it was a Sketch library. Our 1.0 release was a lot of the things that you would consider like atomic components, but it was all in design. So we didn't have a code companion piece to it, which you will find is a recurring theme and problem. A lot of the time the designers can make something, but it's tough to get it out into code. So the way we were operating was the individual product teams were all trying to ingest this file, and Sketch did not have the web component integration that Figma does. So I'm assuming a lot of you have used Figma. If you haven't, it runs on the web. You can just load it up anytime you want. It'll work anywhere, and it effectively works by kind of emulating a DOM. It's like a fake website in a website. So it behaves a lot more like web code does. So the problem statement that I kept running into is we struggled to get our design system from the designers out to dev. They spin up a new app team. They can't use the Sketch. They just problem after problem after problem. And I set out effectively to try to solve those problems. And a hallmark of this whole thing is you can solve design, system, and team problems with communication. So like all of these problems that we're going to talk about today could be solved without you using my tool or without you building interesting CI/CD pipelines or using automation. If you can all get on the same page, and if you can build a communication strategy around design. I think a lot of the time design and development, even within the same team, end up siloed. And if you can raise it up and get a plan in place, please enjoy my talk, but like you could solve a lot of these problems before they become problems just through communication. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Like I'm going to pitch you guys tech solutions to problems, but you can also just go and talk to your UI team and like sit down and have a regular touch point in a meeting and like build some of those, because at the end of the day, to get mature, that is what you're going to have to do. So you need a design system, and you need a design system, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. Everybody needs a design system, in my opinion. Be it the communication piece of just you guys have docs and process, but you all need a design system, and maybe bees. And from what I saw in the pre-show survey, most of you don't have a design system. Very few of you do, in fact. And I might almost challenge that thought as we move forward. I imagine you might have something that I would consider almost like a proto-design system. But the fact that you don't have anything, or at least most of you say you don't have anything, I find interesting. And it's kind of what led me to try to solve some of these problems. So in the survey, most of you haven't really tried. And there's a lot of reasons why it starts and fails, but it was just interesting. And I think personally, I have seen that it is very difficult to get a design system off the ground due to organizational pressures. So when you stop and you're working on a project, so like you're on a product team and you think, wow, wouldn't it be great working in Angular if these Angular components could also go to the other Angular team over there? Like you're in a checkout team and there's 4 product teams in your checkout flow. You're in cart and checkout and you are using almost the exact same stuff, but you're not sharing those components. And you go, hey, management, can I take like 2 weeks worth of velocity and just make a bunch of components for the team? And then the business goes, are you still going to deliver your features? And it dies on the vine. This brings me back to design systems can scale. So in this situation here, you want to build your components, you want to share them. Real example, the developer and the team actually did start making components and sharing them across cart and checkout. They just did it really slowly, because it did help. They got the developers together from different teams, they used communication, and they did that. So they started to build a proto-design system because it was what they could do and it was what was working for them, is to just share 10 or 15 components in Angular. So let's talk about growth. So coming back to nothing, okay? You have no design system, you have nothing. We're gonna approach this from the lens of a designer to start off with. Your design system is going to regularly pump out new components. It might start with design tokens, which is going to be like colors and variables that are reusable and typography. And then you're going to go up and you're going to add a button to that. And then you're going to start adding your button variants to that. And it's going to evolve in fits and starts. And usually there are natural places to have what would be a release, but in my life I have almost never seen a design system team be treated like a product unless you work at Spotify. And it rarely gets this is a 1.0 release. What more often happens is the company spins up a new initiative, and inside the same design system, they decide, hey, we want to build a mobile app, but we don't want to build it with React native. That would make too much sense because we're all on React. And we're going to build it with Swift and Kotlin. This is a real example. This whole talk is real examples. It's basically just me doing therapy for 45 minutes, so I apologize. I ran this talk by a friend who used to work at the same company as me, and he's just like, did you just take like 3 years of our life and turn it into a talk? And I just, so anywho, the Swift and Kotlin app, that's a new design system. And this is one of the first stumbling blocks of, I'm gonna open to the crowd here. That little offshoot there, is that a new design system or is that the same design system? Anybody? So you're in the same company, you're using the same patterns, using the same styles. Your marketing department is going to yell at both of you equally if you decide to change the color pink. We'll get to that in a second. So it's part of the same system. And this is really what I'm talking about here, is you need to have a systems approach to not just, when I say design, I should probably be specific. You need a systems approach to Figma. You need a systems approach to your HTML and CSS. You need a systems approach to how you are tracking color. You need to move to having a systems approach, because as you grow, this is what my friend dubbed sunflower. He says it is the sunflower growth pattern. You are always going to follow the sun. Every team that starts up trying to build a design system, trying to build a pattern library or component library or whatever you want to call it, they're going to follow the sun, or if you're marketing, the North Star. And you as the design system team, or you as the designer, or you as the developer, are going to keep releasing new components. That line keeps going up. You keep building like the core branch of your design system. And you maybe had a B2B internal app. So this is something I've seen a lot, is the internal team, nobody cares about what it looks like. Somebody I was talking with out in the hall and I were chatting about this. They don't care, so they just use whatever. You might have Bootstrap just living there, but then somebody comes in as a designer and says that Bootstrap should look like the brand. And now that line is your original components just kind of going on forever because it was done 5 years ago, and no one's going to update the internal system. So it's still part of your design system. And then what happens if, for example, marketing comes in and wants to refresh the brand, or Thailand wants to make it look hyper modern, or as their prototypes looked like iOS. Real examples here of what I have personally experienced is Thailand comes in and builds its own design system, and they want it to be adopted because the executives go, well, hold on, that's going to be a mobile app, and you guys already had that mobile app library from earlier. This should be its own thing. We're going to call it Mobile Foundations, and it's going to be a design system, thus spoke management. And now you have 3 component libraries, design systems, variables, patterns, all the fun buzzwords that are now all careening together into a new branch of this design system. So what do you do in these situations, besides be stressed out? So you're missing a shared source of truth. All of these situations are missing a shared source of truth, right? The 1.0 legacy system that never updated is not following the same pattern as everybody else. So you need to standardize. You need to have a shared source of truth. Your designers and your developers and your marketing folks and your product people need to all agree that this article is the source of truth. I personally, in 2025, recommend your Figma. I recommend that your company, your designer, whether you are a 1-person or 5-person company, there is a Figma file out there somewhere that likely strikes fear into the heart of all the developers that open it, and that is your source of truth. It is a reusable file that can be used by all of the designers. They can share their components out, and the developers, by the end of this talk, won't have to reference it, but it should be developer ingestible in some capacity. We'll get into the layers of a design system here in a second, but at its core, you need a source of truth. There are a lot of things that will prevent this. It doesn't even matter what it is. It doesn't need to be a Figma. It could be the PDF of doom. But it needs to exist, and you all need to agree what it is, and this comes back to the communication piece. You and your organization need to sit down and say, that is the rock we're going to follow, okay? If you get nothing else from this talk besides my business card, this. So, designer to designer communication in this model is easy. If you're using Figma as your source of truth, you share the component library, you import them. The hardest part is the naming conventions. And this is something that I also think needs to be aligned. Designers and developers should speak using the same language. They rarely do. I personally just stole the way Bootstrap does it because BTN dash is really easy to remember. Developer to developer communication is slightly harder. It can be a well-oiled machine when you're talking about CI/CD or when you're talking about being able to build apps inside an ecosystem or you're all on the same tech stack. But can you take his code and put it in your app or even your screens? No. And that's what makes it hard because as a designer, I can go grab that designer's file and I can just pull it over and dump it in mine and it works. And then the designers turn around and look at you like, well, why do you have to do work? You already did the work. Because designers are designers, and to a certain degree, developers are developers, and it's a little bit dogs and cats going on. So we need to think about how, to a certain degree, to pitch design systems, right? So if designer-designer communication is relatively easy, and developer to developer is hard, we need to start breaking down, I think, in that communication piece with management and with those around you, how to sell that this is worth it. Design systems will increase your efficiency. It is like there on the box. If they are both able to share components, then they're not going to keep remaking them. If they need to update it, you update it once. The problem is, I've seen time and time again, that it doesn't really make your teams go faster. It lets you be more efficient. It lets you work on the right problems. For designers, when they share their files, now instead of making a button 7 times, I'm instead thinking about, does that really need to be a button? Or could we do something more? What should the flow be? It's freeing up my resources. So when you come out of here and you go to your boss and you say, I think we need a shared source of truth to the designers, pitch it in the fact that you're going to reduce rework. You're going to make everyone more efficient. Generally speaking, we actually, at a place I worked, because I was doing a transformation on design systems, I had to convince them. And I actually went through with a spreadsheet and basically did the math of okay, how long does it take to actually make a component for a designer and a developer? And get it all the way through. Okay, now how many developers do we have that are working in UI? And it's just napkin math. And the number, when you actually put an hourly rate on it, immediately gets all of management to go, oh, we don't have to do that anymore? So you have to, this is just life. This is life in corporate America. You have to phrase it not just in a it's going to be more efficient and increase your velocity. It's going to be we can solve the right problems. It is going to have value. And it needs to be a system. Whoop. So we have to solve for system-to-system communication and not team-to-team communication. Because I think this is the band-aid that a lot of people are putting on all of this. You go to management, you say it's going to increase efficiency, and they respond back with but you already have a weekly scrum of scrums. What more could you need? And it's the systems that need to talk. So when you talk about Figma to code, there will be a demo. We will talk about how to automate it. We will do all those fun tech things, but I'm kind of going over the design system-y bits first. I'm kind of giving you guys a little bit of a design 101 here. So you should think about this like a CI/CD pipeline for your design process, right? So right now, I'm going to just go out on a limb. Most of you who work with a designer, you get comps sent to you. Maybe you get to meet the designer. Maybe they're fun and they move. But at the end of the day, if you Sorry. I'm technically a designer, but I'm also a developer, so like I get to just kind of stand in the middle and make fun of both. So the comps that move are great and all, but that's all you get, right? And a lot of the time those comps are driven by the business, and you weren't even in the room when they were made, which is another thing when you guys go back to communication and you actually have this conversation at your work, which I really hope you do. Say, we need a shared source of truth, and it'd be really cool if I could actually be in the room when you guys decide to invent a whole new component. Designer to developer communication through tools like Figma, relatively easy. I say that because it looks easy on the outside, but I know from personal experience that when you get handed someone's comps in Figma and they go, all right, I'm done, enjoy the comps, and you're like, there's 6 pages here that are all called dashboard. Like, which one am I looking at? And they're like, oh, it's different breakpoints, but like, don't click that one's old. And it's just like, what is going on? That's the reality of the situation, and it doesn't have to be. So we're gonna talk about 3 stages of maturity. Doing pretty good on time. So we're gonna look through the lens through the designers first. This is a cheat sheet I made, which I recommend that the slides will be up someplace at some point. But when you have that conversation with your organization, this is a very easy way on the design and developer side to get a rough idea of where you're at. The next slide will be developers, this is designers. And again, this is all taken from real companies. I am not just, this is my experience distilled into a talk here. So early game, also if any of you guys play games, it's all early, late game, because gamers. So in early game, designers are trying to form a tribe. That's what they're really trying to do. A lot of the time in organizations, designers get siloed out. Tell me if this is familiar. You have a designer that sits on your team, but then every week or so they go back to the big design team in the sky and they like collaborate on stuff and then they come back and tell you what to do. If you don't have enough designers, you haven't experienced that yet. Once you hit about 15, that's the way it works. And once you have that team, if they're doing it right, they have a shared Figma component library. They will call it something different. It will probably have a super fun name like Platinum or like Azure or something, because it's got to be branded and cool. It's going to contain shared design tokens. It's going to have core components. It's going to have specifications. It's going to have the way you build modals. It's all going to be in there. I really hope that they have it wherever you work, and I hope they've shared it with you. If not, it probably exists. And it might be internal to the design team, because a lot of the time they don't want to share it out, and that is a key thing that needs to change to mature. To mature, you need to have everybody working on the same tool, everybody sharing the same code, everybody sharing the same designs. When you hit late game as a design team, you have a big team. And this big team now has big team problems. But what it doesn't have is a lack of components. It probably has too many at this point. They have probably componentized everything. And this is where you as developers get to enter your golden age. Because before this, you were like, what does the checkout flow look like? And after this, they're just like, here is the pre-made thing for checkout flows going forward. And part of this talk is going to get into what happens when that changes. What happens when they've decided to make updates to their big components. But now they're going to have multiple libraries. From that way earlier example, when you hit late game as a design team, you have your app library. You have your web library. You have your just like core atomic components library. And likely by now you have a website. So one of the sources of truth that I recommend if you're maybe not on Figma or you're a smaller shop, you'd like rely on consultants like me, build a website. If you have Storybook, it's not quite good enough in my opinion for this, because it's really driven on you actually reusing the stories, but build a website that follows specification. Or if you've used my tool, it's kind of included in the middle. But you need a source of truth that lives outside you. If you're using Figma or you're using just pure code for it, then there's like a barrier for entry, right? Like how many of you, if somebody was like, go read the Figma file to figure out how to build a thing, you'd be like, oh God. It's a little bit like hearing, go look at the SharePoint site. It's in that, I mean, use SharePoint if you got to, but it's like in that vein. If you agree your source of truth is a website, cool, but either way, by the time you hit late game as a designer, if you are a designer, please have a website. Mostly so the product people can see what the buttons are supposed to look like, because it helps reduce, before I move on, what I'll basically say is it helps reduce the situation you get in where you guys demo to the product team and the product people go, ooh, why does it look like that? And then you can send them the design system website and you go, look, we're just following the design system, please go yell at them. And they go, oh, okay, I've never seen this before. This is what all the components are supposed to look like. Developers, you're welcome to disagree with me on this, but in the early game, the UI dev on every single team gets their specs from a designer. You have a designer, they give you your specs, they give you your comps. Like I said, sometimes they move. Those are the good designers, keep them. And you take the comps, you rip it out, you put the CSS in, you argue with the HTML. Never use the generated HTML in Figma, it's bad. If you guys want to know why it is bad, please see me after. It'll take about 10 minutes to explain. Figma was built in an interesting way. Not gonna waste your time on it now. In the mid-game, developers, you have come together in some capacity. You have tried to form some level of tribe. You have your you have your developer cool kids club for your design system, for your UI. Maybe it's just an Angular component library. Maybe you guys are like finally got them to let you actually load Storybook up and you're starting to write stories so that you're building stories on things and you're reusing it. I would say in the modern world, once you have turned Storybook on, that's when you really hit that mid-game to some degree. I have it in late game because you don't need Storybook. It's part of this talk. You don't need it. I just use it as an example because I think it's hot right now and it does a lot of the things that I think developers need it to do, but it has some issues. When you hit late game, you and the designers are on a one-to-one source of truth. And you have used communication to build pipelines to keep it updated. This is where most design systems, when you get them up and running, will fail. I have a slide later on that will go into it if we get that far, but updating is where things get hard. So when you have a big design system, you don't just have buttons and form fields and radios, you have cards and modals and the behavior of how they open and close, and you have Lottie animations on top, and you have this really cool thing that makes the whole thing go like this and pop, and then you're like, the designers come in and want to change that, and it's a 2-week affair. And that's where late game is both awesome because you can spend more time problem solving and less time messing around with UI, but it's also really challenging. And I would say one of the hallmarks of you have hit late game is if you start a new project and you don't have to load Bootstrap into it to get a UI on it. It actually, like, you can load your own thing into it and you're like, hey, my buttons look right. So this is the core problem statement. Before we move on to some fun demos, does anyone have any questions? I take silence as no. I'll be here afterwards. Okay, so from Figma with love, Figma files in you. So I did see that some people were interested in Figma. Hopefully, do not update, no, do not update on me during a demo. Can everybody see this? Okay. We have Wi-Fi working, I think. Okay, so on the community, I have put up the buttons Figma Design System V1. The only one that's publicly available is our like basic low plan one that is just usable. You can go get it. When I would come in to work with clients, a lot of the time they would say things like, we want to use Bootstrap, and then you go to the Figma store and there isn't actually an official Bootstrap. And then you end up remaking all of it anyway, and this isn't even what developers really need. So this exists, we're going to release more, but we're being kind of cautious with it. But effectively, you can go get a design system off the Figma store. It doesn't have to be ours. Ours just works with our tool for integration through to things like Storybook. In our tool, and we will get into the demo in a second here, but we're just going to give you guys kind of a tour of Figma here. This is a library. So what that means is it has assets that are organized. So when I'm a designer, I mentioned this before, designer-to-designer communication is super easy. I can come in here and go, I want the primary button. And there's my primary button. That's all visual, and I as a designer can share this with my designer friends, and we can all use the same button. If only it was this easy for developers. So this is our kind of starter file. And what is cool about my tool that we're going to get into is it allows you to customize this and export code at the end. So like that is going to be the key takeaway from this talk is how that works. But you can also just come in here if you're relatively new to Figma, and you can turn developer mode on and it will give you the specs. Like I said, meet me afterwards if you want to hear about why these will oftentimes be wrong. So when you are utilizing Figma, you want your designers to make something like this that is small and contained and easy to follow. And this comes back to the communication piece. They have a habit, and I'm a designer, so I am in that they, of we work in a very stream of consciousness way. We're creatives. So we are going to make 600 versions of the toggle, and then maybe one of them gets turned into a component, and we might not clean up the file. And even then, we might go, well, that wouldn't be a cool variant if we put like an icon in it, so I'm going to leave it there. And then you as the developer come in and you don't know what the right one is. So this is our really basic Figma file that just kind of shows states and all of the basic things you need to create a design system. So this would be what I would call a like small design system, okay? There are definitely components that we could add to this, but we kept it small on purpose, and it is expandable. So you as a user can come in here and copy and paste. So let me do one thing real quick, and then we are going to hop in. Because as long as my internet works, we don't have to worry about things. Yep, my internet seems okay. Okay, cool. So, story time. I left a job and we were really struggling to do something that I considered should be really simple. We wanted our components in Figma to show up on a website. Mentioned before, website, good source of truth. We declared our website the source of truth, and we were struggling. There was no easy way. You can go into Figma and you can copy paste it out, but it doesn't render. You can't just copy out of Figma and throw it on a website. So I decided, all right, how hard can this be? Turns out slightly more than I thought it was going to be. So this tool is currently free to use. So if you go to buttons.design, you can register. If you do not have a Figma account, after this talk, I will add a little just like message me, I don't have a Figma account. We'll let you use the corporate one just to play with it, because I know a lot of y'all are designers. To use Figma, all you need to do, if you do have a corporate account, is you can click that Figma community link I showed you before, and you can just download it. Like, it'll load into your Figma, it loads in Figma, it's in your browser, you're good. This will also work with a free plan. So Figma is a free tool, it lets you have one file. So if you want to and you want to learn Figma and play around with it, I think it's a really cool tool, even as a developer. It's like a golden hammer, you don't really need Adobe anymore. It works awesome. I would recommend use it as an opportunity to learn a little bit, but you can just make a free Figma account and download that file. You can also download it from us and upload it. So Figma has an API. It has interesting decisions made. But they do have an API, and it is a little basic. They paywall a lot of the fun features behind the enterprise plan, which is a couple $100,000 a year at the average size company. Last bill I got from them was 70 grand for the enterprise plan, and I do not recommend it. So little things like getting variables out is apparently an enterprise feature. We decided that was kind of silly, so we wrote our way around it. So what we've got here is the ability for you to link a file, in this case our basic one, to a repository, to an out. If my internet holds and I have time, I'll show you linking it all the way to Storybook. But effectively, what you can do here is, so this is designed so that when you make a new account, it will default to the component library I just showed you guys out of the box. You basically have to do nothing besides throw your Figma API key and your file ID in. To find your file ID, it is as simple as sharing a Figma file. I'm probably gonna leak somebody's account info right now, but yeah, so you click copy link right here, and it is literally right here. And before you tell me and everyone else has, hey, why can't I just put the share link in the link here and it just pull it out? I go, yeah, I should have done that. So anyway, that's how you get a file ID. Once you have them, the API doesn't have everything, but it has enough for you to get basic styling information. So once you have created your base file, you run a sync command, and we are processing all of this locally on our servers. And I get green for go, and now I come over here, and since it's working, I'm gonna refresh the page, and we're all just gonna hope the internet holds, because I'm gonna feel real silly if it doesn't. Cool, so it loads. So there's my buttons, and because I was playing around with this beforehand, I have a new component button, but we'll get there in a second. So far, okay, cool, things link. Where this gets cool, if you have ever worked with a designer, is if I come in here and I go, you know what, as the designer, I think all of our buttons should be about this wide. You know what, what size is this? Let's do this the fast way. I want them to be 171 pixels wide. Across our whole experience, that's gonna be our new minimum size. And you as the developer now have to go and do a bunch of stuff. Or you wait for the toast to be green. I might have baked in a little bit of extra time into the toast manually, don't tell anybody. Live demo, please work. Live demo works. All right, the talk can go just in fire from here. So for those of you that work with designers, and those of you who work with Figma, you know it is not this easy. For those of you who don't, trust me, it's not that easy. So what we've got here is all of the core components you need are here and are editable and they are functional. So like one of the things I mentioned before is Figma doesn't really output good code. So what we did was we wrote a lot of the code from scratch that we thought should be here, and then we just leveraged the API to give it your character. So as an example, you want to make them bigger, you want to change the color, you want to change border radiuses, you want to do things like that, you want to change the text, you want to add an icon. All of those like core things that are, that should be automatic in my opinion, are here. And currently we've got two ways to get it out. A download button that just gives you HTML and CSS for everything, And we also have Storybook integration, which I'm going to try to run locally in a second here as part of this demo, and we're going to see how that goes. But everything through to typography. I also mentioned before, like, website is a source of truth. So one of the things that I felt was important was the ability to like have some documentation that explains your components, that explains like when to use headings. So we pre-filled these, but there is an option for you to add your own flair to it. There's options to get a publicly accessible URL, branding, all the fun things you could imagine here. But at its core, this gives you a way to have components. Ryan, you might say, I want a new button. How hard is that? Actually, I think I already had the test one up there. So I can come in here, and we're going to make buttons stir trek. Because honestly, I didn't expect this demo to work this far, and I thought we were going to be in a video, so we're just going to go for it. So button stir trek. So I have now made that in my dashboard. Now we're back to Figma. So as a designer, if I want to make a stir trek button, I need to make a new component. So this is what your designer should be doing, or if you are a designer, what you should be doing is you basically want to make a new component. So for those of you that aren't super familiar with Figma, yeah, I have a little enough time. When you see can you guys actually see what I'm mousing over there in the corner at all? A little? Okay. So long story short, there are components and there are instances of that component. So what you want to do in situations is actually like make this a component. So you'll see it has 4 little diamonds above it. That's what says, hi, I'm a component. We're going to call it the stir trek button. We're going to just call it the stir trek button. And we're going to give it a different color because that way we can really tell it apart. It's the danger button now. That's the color code it's using. Because stir trek is definitely danger. And then all I need to do is sync it. So I'm going to tell you, while this toast takes longer than it should, nothing is stopping you from building this except organizational pressure, if you wanted to. You could theoretically also email me and we could discuss like loading it on a server if you really wanted to, but like you could build these integrations. I personally don't recommend it, not just because I want you to use my tool, but because organizations like to change tools a lot. And this is one place where going out to the software community I think has advantages. If you guys switch to Sketch and you work with like a vendor, then they can go, okay, it works with Sketch, or it works with PenPot, or it works with Axure, or it works with whatever. Or if you decide to go to React or Storybook, etc., those integrations are buildable. Or use the basic. Also, when you get mature, you might have 3 or 4 design systems that you want to connect intelligently. I filled way more time than I needed to. Let's see if the stir trek button works. And it should. Maybe? Did I not run things? Some demo had to go wrong today. I'm glad it was this one. Partially because I have this one prepped in case it didn't quite work right. Button stir trek. I have a weird suspicion my internet might be dropping. We'll give this one more sec to load. And if it doesn't, we'll move on because we have a few minutes left. So go back to the library, we'll refresh this. Part of it loaded, that's weird. Don't be broken. Nope, broken. Okay, this is live demo, this is what happens. We're gonna try my next demo real quick. So, fingers crossed on this one, y'all. So, some of you use Storybook, not all from the example I just saw. So what I've gone ahead and done is I have initialized a Storybook, and it is just a different endpoint. So effectively, buttons by default just gives you HTML and CSS. We have the ability to export. We have some extra layers on top where everything that is inside the button type, or whatever type you use, will go in and become its own story as an alternate styling. So with that all said, this should work. We're going to hope this works. So because they told me I wouldn't have internet for this, I tried to fiddle with this so that it could just run locally so that I didn't have to rely on my server. And I think something definitely broke before this. Okay, well you guys don't need to see me watch here and debug what I probably hit the wrong button on right before this, which is disappointing, but that's where we're at. That is so weird. All right, well I'm not going to debug live with y'all. Long story short, there's the I don't have internet version, but it works. You guys can see the other buttons loaded through. Something's just not refreshing right with stir trek. I don't think the API is being hit with with my internet being so shady. So back to the end of this. Okay, we have about 10 minutes remaining. So you need to create a library. It does not necessarily matter the scope or the scale, but you need some form of library. And I wanted to bring this up. Does everybody know what this is? Okay, got a hand. So this has started more arguments than I think it has like solved. Straight up, the amount of arguments I have had of, well, what's an atom? Is it the button that's the atom, or the color of the button that's the atom, or the type that's the, like, what? I think that this system as an idea is okay. I think at the end of the day, it is not a Bible to work off of, and you and your team should sit down and think, okay, what actually do we want to track? So think about it from a tracking perspective, and I like to use Agile as an example. I assume most of you are using Agile in some capacity. So you have a user story. That's generally the smallest form. If you guys have tasks, I'm sorry. If you do, cool. You can kind of draw the same parallel around, and I think it helps to treat your design system like a product. I think it helps to think of whatever your library is, whatever you're going to use to store your components, whatever you're going to use to store your documentation, that is your library. So you need a shared source of truth that you all agree on, and it needs to have the bare minimum functionality of a library. You can use whatever nomenclature you wish, but at the end of the day, talk it out and think, what is the largest thing we want to track? What is the largest thing we want to keep in our system, in our library? That's your big side. I have never in my life met anyone who actually put a page in a design system, except for like a scaffold, because you're on an iPad app and you want the side nav to be static. You want it to be like reliable. With that said, what I see a lot of folks doing is they grab Tailwind, they grab Bootstrap, they grab Storybook, I think it just kind of works out of the box. They grab a thing that they think is going to be their library. In reality, if you are a solo developer working on a random project and you just want to implement a basic app, yeah, grab Bootstrap, that's fine. But most of the time when you are at a slightly, you're going to ship something. Someone is going to have an opinion of what it looks like, and Bootstrap's probably not going to hold up, and it's going to stop looking like Bootstrap very quickly, and you haven't really gained anything in 2025 by putting that in. So a lot of the things that like Bootstrap or Tailwind are automating with like the ability to dynamically resize, etc. It's Flexbox. Like it's not as cool as it was back in the day when we like were using grid systems because we didn't have anything better than that. So I recommend that you bake that in to your system and you, in some capacity, start from scratch. It sounds silly, but like to get a rapid prototype out, throwing some UI on it is cool and all, but if you have a basic library in your company, in your team, that has, like what I showed you guys with the button site earlier, like the basic core components, then realistically all you're missing to make that app look like your company is a nav bar that has your logo on it. And like, realistically, right? Like when you load up a Bootstrap site, you know it's a Bootstrap site. But you can make 10 or 15 components, sync them through, and then you have a really basic library that you can use. And if you want to, one of the things I think is really fun with Tailwind is if you have, go look at the color page on Tailwind sometime. You don't have to right now. But go look on the color page. They have pretty much every color you could possibly use on the internet on their color page. Because Tailwind is not designed to be a brand. It is not even really designed to be your system. I think it's a Band-Aid. I think Tailwind is cool. If you're using Tailwind, don't stop. But you make it work for you, don't use it out of the box. And this is what designers are usually going to do, right? Like if you're a developer and you implement Tailwind and you just start picking random colors or use Bootstrap and use the default, the designer's going to come in and be like, well, that's not what our brand's supposed to look like. Change all these things. So there's headwinds in using these tools. I think we use them like Band-Aids. A few minutes left. So let's talk about governance and management. So who can add to a design system? Who can push to prod? Can you push to prod? I'm sorry. You, in these conversations, need to decide on an approach early. And in my opinion, having done this a while, you need a design czar. You need a design system czar. I would even recommend more than one person. And that person is your gatekeeper to adding components. The opposite side of that is what I have heard referred to as federation, a federated design system. This is probably closer to what most people get into when they get into one, is anyone can add things to it, and all they need as a hallmark is reusability. So is your design system, do you need a button? Yes, that's reusable, we add it. Do you need a modal pop-up? Yes, we need to add it. Where you get into trouble with that is people add everything to it because they just default to it should all be a component. You can kind of run a middle ground where you have a design system czar or two, and they don't have a team under them. They're relying on the federation to pull components in. But if you look at the really successful design systems out there, if you look at Salesforce, you look at Spotify, thank you. You look at the big players that are using these processes and technologies well, they have a team. That team is designers and developers working together. They have evangelists internally who push it out. They have easy on, easy off. They have consultants. And that is a lot to ask for most companies, but you can get there organically. Start in the early game, move to the late game slowly, but early on say, what approach do we want to take to this? Do we want Bob to be the czar of the design system and he approves all the components that go in? And like it's his job to watch all the demo videos and see what components should go? Or is it the other way? Another thing to consider if you do have a design system team is you can have them build components for you. So when you need something in your design system, in your app, instead of you building all that UI code, if it's reusable, you go to the design system team and they build it. This is more common at places like Spotify or equivalent, where if you need something, they will basically build it for you and they will send it out to your team. There is a lag time to this. This is a very late game we're talking right now, but it's just something to consider. So you can do that. How do you add a new component? So this was brought up to me by somebody earlier who talks about a junior designer can cause a lot of problems in a tool like buttons. As you saw, breaks a little bit, a button errors out. In reality, you need to have some guardrails, but especially the earlier on in the process you are, I think just getting things reusable quickly is better than putting too many guardrails on. So if you are working in a relatively small company, but you have a lot of projects, a lot of irons in the fire, aim for kind of reusability as that North Star, but again, have the conversation. And I think one of the most important things to consider is think about when something is dreamed up, is someone actually developing that thing? So something I have seen a lot is that designers, we are very creative folk. We like to always do the best we can and the right thing. And I am personally guilty of this. I will come up with really, really cool ideas that go well beyond the scope of what we can do in 2 sprints. And that's all the time we got for this project. And it goes back to the conversation piece, but you need to look at the dreams and think, okay, how do I actually develop this? Should I actually develop this, and how do I bring it in? I think, yeah, we can call it. Thanks for listening. That was my talk. So I have a post survey up there. You are welcome to put your Storybook demo broke completely as the thing that went wrong. But if you have anything else, and then I will be here. Coming up, chat.